Okay. Okay, so good morning, boys and girls. Okay. And I would like to welcome you today to a very, very special assembly, which I will be telling you about in just one moment. We're going to begin our assembly with the Pledge of Allegiance, so I would like to invite Max and Parker to lead us in the pledge. Thank you. Okay, so boys and girls, today it is my pleasure to introduce to you a very, very special visitor. And our visitor's name is Captain Michael Duffy. Captain Duffy is not only a very special person, but he is a very, very special person because he is the husband of our very own Mrs. Duffy, who you all know. So, Captain Duffy, okay, thank you. Okay. Captain Duffy served in the Viet Nam War in the United States Army Signal Corps, and he is here today to give you a very special message. Next week, on Friday, when we are not in school, we will be celebrating a very, very special day. Does anyone know the name of the day that we're going to be celebrating? Okay, yes.
Veterans Day.
We're going to be celebrating Veterans Day, and it is such an important day, and so we are very, very grateful to Captain Duffy for coming here today to tell us about the importance of Veterans Day. So please join me in welcoming Captain Michael Duffy.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Lyons, and thank all of you. I'm honored to be here this morning. Thank you. It's been a long time, I think, since anybody called me Captain Duffy. I got out of the Army many years ago, and now I'm just Mr. Duffy, or Mrs. Duffy's Mr. Duffy. But it's good to see you all, and thank you. We're observing Veterans Day today at this assembly, but you all know, I see, that Veterans Day is actually next Friday, November 11th. You'll be off from school that day for the holiday. I'm a veteran of the war in Viet Nam. In Vietnam, I was an officer in charge of Army photographers who took pictures of American and Vietnamese soldiers in that war. That was nearly 45 years ago, before even your parents were born. Many of you may have a parent or a grandparent who is a veteran, someone who served in the U.S. military as a soldier or a sailor, an airman, a Marine, maybe a nurse or a doctor in uniform. Ask your folks about that. Ask your folks if there are any veterans in your family. That's good to know. Some people confuse Veterans Day in November with Memorial Day in May. Memorial Day, which is the last day in May, honors men and women who have died while serving our country in wartime. Veterans Day, November 11th, is dedicated to living veterans, men and women who have served in our armed forces in defense of the United States. Both holidays are observed with parades and patriotic speeches and days off from school, don't forget that. You may have seen the Memorial Day parade in Manhasset or another town last spring. Next Friday, the annual Veterans Day parade will march along Fifth Avenue in New York City, and you can see it on TV. Both days remind us of the service and the sacrifice of our men and women in the United States military. Veterans Day used to be called Armistice Day. An armistice is an agreement between nations who are at war to stop fighting and to end the war. Armistice Day originally marked the end of World War I, which ended officially at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 11 o'clock on November 11th, way back in 1918. Since then, Armistice Day has become the Veterans Day holiday, every November 11th to honor all those who have served in our country's military forces, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, or the Merchant Marine, all the way back to those who served in George Washington's Continental Army or the brand new United States Navy in the American Revolution. Today, there are approximately 23 million Americans living whom we honor on Veterans Day, including all those who continue to serve in uniform around the world. Now, not all veterans have actually fought in wartime, but a common bond they share is their oath of service, in which they swear to defend the Constitution of the United States of America and affirm their willingness to die, if necessary, in defending this nation. When I became an officer in the Army, I raised my right hand to swear to this same oath. Now, when my father and millions of other Americans were in uniform in World War II, they were just known as soldiers or GIs. That really hadn't changed much by the time I was in Vietnam. But today, we say servicemen and servicewomen. We recognize that military veterans, the people who have served, and those who are now serving their country around the world, they've been doing something very important, something that represents their love and respect for the United States. They have put the needs of their country first and their own lives second. They've made great sacrifices, including long separations from their families, their children, and their loved ones, injury and even death, and endured unimaginable discomforts in all corners of the earth. Their goal is clear: to protect the freedoms that we enjoy as Americans, the freedoms we enjoy here at Buckley, in our towns, and throughout this country. So we honor veterans on Veterans Day and all those who serve in the military. And when we meet a veteran or a serviceman or a servicewoman, we say, thank you. Thank you for your service. And we mean it. And you can thank the servicemen overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan yourselves by writing to them through Buckley. Tell these men and women that you're grateful for the difficult and dangerous work they do away from home to keep us safe here. Tell them that you are grateful for their service and for their sacrifice. Tell them that you are looking forward to the day when they come home again to us. Thank you all very much. So thank you very much. We have a couple of minutes for questions and maybe answers, and I know that Buckley students are good questioners. So would someone like, there's a gentleman whose seat I took. Yes, sir. Please. Yes. Stand up a second. Yeah. What do you do on Veterans Day? What do I do, or what do you do? What do we do? On Veterans Day, I think about my service when I was in the Army and about other veterans who served and about those veterans who did not come home from the wars. What we do on Veterans Day is to think, and we think about men and women who stepped up for service for their country and are protecting us even today. That's what we do. Yes. How about some of these 8th graders? Yes, sir. How long was I in the Army for? I was in the Army for 2.5 years. At the time that I was at the right age to be in the Army, we had something called the draft, where young men were selected to be in the Army whether they wanted to or not. And it was a system that had some good things about it and some bad things about it. If you didn't want to be in the Army and you had to be, you wouldn't have liked that. If you wanted to be in the Army, then you would have liked that. As it happened, I was a volunteer. And when I went to Cornell University, they had a very good ROTC program, and I became an officer in that program. So I was in the Army for 2.5 years in the active Army, and I was stationed variously in Georgia, Viet Nam, and New Jersey. These were the great high spots. But I had to be in the reserves for a few more years after that. Yes, in the back, please. Good. Was I proud to be a veteran? I'm proud to this day to be a veteran. I'm proud that I had the opportunity to serve my country. I'm proud of what I did, and I'm proud that I came home to my family safe and sound. Please, please stand up. That's a very good question. I went to film school in the Army. Can you believe this? In addition to learning how to shoot and do Army stuff, I spent 3 months in a film school where I learned how to be a motion picture photographer. And I was able to take that skill, plus other experience that I had in the Army, and get a job at ABC News. And I spent 40 years at ABC News as a producer and as an executive, really using the experience that I had, learning how to be a cameraman and learning how to be an editor and a producer while I worked in the Army. So my Army experience was a very good grounding for what became the rest of my career. Yes. Yes, sir. I'm sorry? Did I fight in the war? Any wars? Well, I was in Viet Nam, which was a very serious war, a war in which a lot of Americans died. I'm happy to say that I didn't shoot anybody when I was in Vietnam, and nobody shot me. So I thought that was fair. Yeah. Yes, in the back, please, in the blazer. I'm sorry, I didn't quite. Did I ever do? Did I ever regret? Well, that's a good question. I certainly regretted being away from my wife and family. I missed my wife and my mom and dad and my brother. I missed my friends. I was in Vietnam for a year, as most soldiers were at that time. So I missed them. So that's the closest to regret I guess I had. I felt that I was doing an important job, and I felt that it was worth my time and worth my loneliness to be able to do that. So I'm happy about that. Yes, please. Yes. Your dad's dad, that's your granddad, huh? Okay, that's terrific. I hope you will say thank you for your service to him. Yes, ma'am, in the back. The people I knew, friends of mine, high school classmates of mine who died in Vietnam, were not with me when that happened. One of them was a Navy flyer whose plane was shot down. Another was a guy who was an infantryman who was shot. I'm happy to say that I never knew anybody in the Army when I was there who was killed in battle. So to answer your question, I have to speak more about what I have read and discussed with other soldiers than what I've experienced in particular. And soldiers depend on each other in war in a more intense way than Buckley students here depend on each other. But you know about teamwork, and you know about depending on each other. And when you're a soldier in war, you rely on other soldiers to keep you safe, to watch your back, and to carry out the mission with you. And when one of them is killed in combat, it's enormously sad. It must be terrible to happen to have somebody who is so close to you. And people say that there is no closer situation than to be in combat. So to lose somebody close to you in that way must be just awful. But I've never experienced it myself. I do know that what you have to do is keep on going. You have to keep on with the mission and keep your eye on the big goal, which is to finish the mission and come home. I think I have to stop. I know there are other things planned for this assembly. Thank you very much for your attention. You're a great audience. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Mr. Duffy, for such good job. Thank you for such an inspiring message that you left with us today. I especially want you to think about the last thing that Mr. Duffy said, because I think it's a message for all of us in life. And keep your eye on the goal and keep your eye on the mission. So maybe it's keep your eye on the mission and keep your eye on the goal. And that's a wonderful message for us to think about as we go through life. So thank you again. It was very inspiring and informative. And I know next Friday, November 11th, we are all going to remember some of the things that Captain Duffy shared with us today. And now, thank you. And now, boys and girls, I'm going to ask Mrs. McGibbons to speak to you for a minute. We have a buddy assembly planned following this, and she will tell you exactly what you are going to do to show your appreciation for our veterans.
Good morning. I think that Captain Duffy did a wonderful job. Thank you so much. And this is great for our buddy assembly. What we're going to do now is we're going to break up into our buddy classrooms. And what I would like you to do is work with your buddy to create a card for a service person. I'm going to collect them, and we're going to put them together with the candy that we've collected for Operation Gratitude, and we're going to send the candy and the thank you cards over to the troops. I think that's a wonderful idea.